I'm doing a review for this book. It's Downsizing by Tom Watson. Tom Watson was a prominent Labour MP. He was quite a large man, not that that's important to his politics, but a couple of years ago I saw him on TV and I thought, Tom Watson? I thought is that the same Tom Watson? After I double checked that it was the same man, I was really taken aback by how much weight he'd lost, and I thought, wow, all due respect, because that would not have been easy. Last year I had a complete rethink of how I view food, and I went from eating very little meat to embracing the idea of eating lots of meat, as well as cutting out many carbs and trying my very hardest to avoid refined sugar. Still working on that one. I found out earlier this year that Tom Watson used the keto diet to lose so much of his weight. Because of my own turnaround in dietary opinions, I was even more interested to hear his story. I found this book very easy to read. I flew through it. This is quite a sanitised version of Watson's life. His political career sounds very shiny and lovely, and there are almost no negative opinions voiced about his contemporaries. This book has given me no idea about Watson's political views, other than he's staunchly Labour and believes in making everybody's life better. Not very specific. What Watson is focusing on in this book is his diet and weight throughout his life, and importantly, how he lost 100 pounds in the late 20-teens. Watson is very clear from the outset that this is his story of what worked for him, and he's not recommending it for everyone. Watson explains how he turned his back on the nutritional guidelines endorsed by his own government. This is a recurring issue in the diet community, and you have to question why the government so heavily and single-mindedly endorses a diet structure that doesn't work for so many people. Whilst the nutritional guidelines may work for some people, they certainly do not work for all, and their rigid enforcement may be holding many people back from finding the eating plan that would be healthier and more successful for them. I broke the most powerful food rule of all, the one that said that fat is bad for us. Incredibly, increasing my saturated fat intake helped me to break a 30-year sugar habit. I would also consider myself a sugar addict, and as much as I pursue a high fat and protein diet with low carbs and sugar, I fall off that wagon a lot. Sugar is a drug, and it calls to me from a 10-metre radius. Watson talks about his upbringing and his diet, which included the processed foods that most families eat. At uni, he enjoyed takeaway foods and drinking, as many students do. It's a lot easier for your body to handle taking on weight when you're younger, and you can still be active when required, even if carrying some extra pounds. Watson has always come across to me as someone more interested in his politics than his appearance, and that also comes across in the book. Whilst he was aware that he was getting bigger and he wasn't jumping for joy about it, his mind was more consumed by his current job and the activity of the moment. Watson recalls some embarrassing stories related to his weight and eating habits, such as being trapped in a security capsule as it locked shut and set off all the alarms because an inbuilt sensor had detected 2 people in the capsule, as well as breaking numerous pieces of household furniture and cracking the bath. But my favourite one was not noticing that he was finishing off some leftover cake that a customer had left behind in a cafe. Watson discusses his compulsion to eat. For me, wolfing down the entire block of chocolate was a physical and physiological compulsion. I couldn't not eat it all. I can completely relate to this. Watson talks about the fatigue he felt before he sorted his diet out. This is symptomatic of carb abuse. He laments about the lost time when he didn't have the energy to spend with his children. And he describes the burst of energy that is gained from cutting out carbs. Watson talks about how he ignored his health concerns. Because of his career, he was often working long hours and eating on the go. This is a recipe for a bad diet. Not only did Watson not want to face the reality that he could have a serious health problem, he also felt ashamed that he had got himself into this situation. When Watson did eventually speak to a doctor, he was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, but he still struggled to take control of his weight. He was advised by the NHS to consult the Department of Health's Eat Well plan, which recommends 5 portions of fruit and veg a day and meals based around carbohydrates with fat, especially saturated fat, reduced. Watson did have a go at this eating plan, but it was not very successful. He recalls carefully weighing out 20 grams of dry porridge oats, which probably equated to a fifth of my usual supersized serving, and wondering how on earth that was going to sustain me until lunchtime. More often than not, it didn't, and I'd find myself indulging in 11s and loading up with a croissant or two. Despite implementing these changes, and despite trying to follow the standard guidelines, my weight seemed to plateau rather than plummet, and disappointingly, I continued to experience overwhelming carb and sugar cravings. This led to wobbles, but even when Watson did give in to his cravings, he became more aware that he was giving in to something that he wanted to resist. Because of his failure to progress, Watson was even recommended for weight loss surgery, but this was not an avenue he wanted to pursue. He wanted to have a more natural approach to weight loss, but after losing hope in the standard NHS dietary advice, Watson looked for alternatives. It was sad to read that he felt too ashamed to speak to other men of his age who he knew were also diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. But he did start researching furiously on his own, particularly feeling motivated by Dr. Michael Mosley. Although I was concerned that Watson kept referring to himself as a nerd because he wanted to learn how to improve his health, and he was doing his own research to achieve this. Taking responsibility for your life and doing your own research makes you neither a nerd nor a conspiracy theorist. It means you are educating and empowering yourself. Despite his new wealth of knowledge, Watson took a while to make the leap into eating a low-carb, high-fat and protein diet, but he did start doing some exercise. By the time Watson seriously tried to use exercise to lose weight, his fitness was at a shockingly bad level. He struggled to walk half a mile, which is a terrible situation to be in. He got a personal trainer, and his retelling of their first session in a kid's playground is both hilarious and tragic. All credit to Watson though, he went back, and that is a very hard thing to do. With commitment, Watson quickly started making progress. He began walking in the park with a friend and challenging himself to walk past a small number of lampposts without stopping. Before too long, he could complete a whole lap. Watson had to work hard to keep to his new fitness schedule, and he had to prioritise his time to concentrate on his new healthy pursuits. Not an easy thing to do when you work in politics, but it was a commitment that he needed to make to be successful. Watson began following a low-carb, high-fat ketogenic diet. This means cutting out breads, pasta and rice, as well as high-carb fruit and veg, and more difficult than all of those, refined sugar. Having a higher level of fat in your diet allows you to resist the calls of sugar more easily. You should also be eating more natural and unprocessed foods and cutting out industrially produced oils. If this sounds like cutting out most of your diet, you're completely normal. But just because these foods are normal does not mean they are not really bad for our health. Instead of these things, you eat more meat, poultry and fish, eggs and dairy, salads, leafy green veg and berries. This diet is fucking delicious, much better than alternative diets, and you soon realise that these are all the best bits of meals, and that carbs are just fillers. And what is in many ways the best thing about a low-carb, high-fat diet is expressed here by Watson. More to the point, I wasn't hungry anymore. No pangs, no cravings, no rumbling stomach. I could barely believe this was happening to me. This diet also recommends intermittent fasting, which is much easier and more rewarding than you would imagine. With his sugar addiction under control, Watson was able to show restraint, even to the point of being able to resist the office snacks. I take my hat off to him. Office snacks are the work of the devil. It had taken a long time, but I'd finally found myself in full control of my thoughts and actions and possessing the inner strength to avoid a Cookie Monster-style biscuit binge. Shunning that chocolate hobnob without a single pang of regret was a truly amazing feeling. On a ketogenic diet, Watson finally started losing serious weight, and he felt great. Watson successfully got down to a size XL, which meant he could buy clothes in regular shops rather than outside retailers. He also felt more awake and more energetic, which meant he was able to enjoy his time with his children more. Another great success was when his type 2 diabetes went into remission, although he also felt a tinge of regret. I had spent 5 years of my life in denial about my health issues, yet had I got my act together sooner, I could have sorted it out in 3 months flat. As he became more active, Watson had a growing interest in exercise, from weightlifting to cycling and mountain climbing. An incredible turnaround from not being able to walk his half-a-mile journey home. Watson even embraced meditation and learnt the importance of restful sleep. Since taking control of his sugar addiction, Watson has also tried to tackle the power of big sugar, and he speaks passionately about it. Although that is a hell of a dragon to take on, and we only have to look around us to see how much power it continues to wield. Watson points out that most families are doing their best in regards to the food they buy and eat, going on the guidance around them, only to find out years later that those foods they were persuaded to buy were bad for our health. Years later, they will find that the foods they switched to were also bad for their health. Most of us don't have the time to read scientific papers and investigate every aspect of the world we are given. We trust that authorities have done the necessary checks for us. More often than not, no one has done the checks, and it is a painstaking effort by individuals to highlight the important issues, which many producers will then sidestep by replacing one ingredient with another that may be equally bad for health. Do I need to compare this to the COVID crap? They tell us that we choose what we eat and how we feed ourselves, even as they knowingly manipulate us into becoming addicted to an unnatural and unhealthy diet. Back in the 1970s, fake food was being sold to working class people as liberation. Why slave away in the kitchen making tea for the family when you could throw in some fish fingers and oven chips and keep everyone happy with hardly any fuss? We wolfed down mountains of chemically reconstructed, additive-stuffed synthetic imitations of actual food. We drank lakes of sugar that burst with bubbles and never quite drenched our thirst. And we got fat. But we didn't blame the food that we ate or the fizz that we drank. No, we blamed ourselves, because the industry that had spent billions refining that food to make it ever more convenient and ever more addictive was cleverer than us. They had already taught ordinary people that the fault was not the food, the fault was the people eating the food. It kept us eating, and it taught us to loathe ourselves and others for lacking the get up and go of previous, more active generations. While preaching active lifestyles as the answer to the problems, these companies are manufacturing food that is so drenched in sugar and additives that it makes it harder, psychologically and physiologically, to get into a routine of regular exercise. Watson highlights the millions of people living with type 2 diabetes in the UK, a condition that not only comes with health complications, but also feelings of shame and fear. Many of these people could improve their condition by changing their diets. Their conditions will not improve with the foods that are being promoted left, right and centre all around us. In his Remission for All mission statement, Watson challenges the one-size-fits-all healthcare advice. Of the people I know who have put their diabetes in remission, the majority have done so by ignoring Public Health England's controversial Eat Well guide. Watson is a fan of technology to keep him challenging himself and having lots of wins along the way. He used apps for tracking his fitness progress, as well as to give breakdowns of what he was eating, including calories and macronutrients. He had a Fitbit and website subscriptions. He watched YouTube videos and listened to podcasts, as well as reading lots of books. I've looked up a few of the books referenced in Downsizing, and they are definitely on my future reading list. This was a very easy book to read, and it held my attention throughout. I would particularly recommend this book for anyone looking to lose a lot of weight. Watson gives lots of details of the everyday struggles of being overweight, and he begins his weight loss journey with small steps designed to give regular achievements. This is really encouraging for anyone who has that big journey ahead of them. And it's also great for people who are interested in their health to remind them of what they need to keep on top of. Okay, here it is again. Okay, and next time I'm back to the heavy books for my next review. It will be Empty Cradles by Margaret Humphreys, and it will be emotional. Okay, thank you.